Our episode kicks off with a girl running, and suddenly, a laser ignites, and she jolts awake from what appears to be a nightmare. The girl quickly jumps out of bed, panting, realizing she's had the same nightmare again. She's still harboring some resentment about it. Then, she spots Faye's game playing on the screen. She knows Faye. He's considered one of the best rookies of all time. Faye declares that the gods smile upon those who work their miracles. Whoever defeats a god becomes a god themselves. Hearing Faye's words, the girl gets excited because she knows that style of play. Nell reckless promises to dedicate her life to Faye. Meanwhile, Licia is grumbling to Miranda, asking why they can't dive. Considering they've formed a team with Pearl as an official member, Miranda tells her to take a look at something on the screen. She shows them the waiting list for diving at their branch. It's jam-packed with people waiting. The reason: every reservation is full, with a minimum wait time of a month. Licia doesn't get it, and Miranda tells her that the reason is Licia and Faye. The Ouroboros's defeat is unprecedented in history and has become quite the hot topic. The folks at the Ruin branch immediately requested a dive. Licia understands and resigns herself to the situation. Then she tells Pearl that they're going to the diving center. Pearl asks why, and Licia responds that they're going to forcefully steal the divine gate. Pearl asks her to stop with that. Pearl grabs Licia tightly, and Licia starts walking, dragging Pearl along, while Pearl complains that her backside is scraping against the ground and will become flat. Faye sees this happening and tells Miranda that it would be dangerous if they did nothing. Licia, in withdrawal from games, could cause trouble. He asks Miranda if she has a good idea, something they could try immediately. Miranda says she does, and then she tells them to pay attention to the screen again. She shows them directions for the World Championship of Games. Next, we see Pearl, Faye, and Licia traveling on a train, and she says there's no way they can thank the older folks enough. After they retired, they used their arises to protect the city and gradually developed the outside world. By the way, the place they were invited to was in the city of Malra, Holy Source. And then they have the memory of Miranda saying it was a competition where athletes from all over the world were invited. Since the day after the Ouroboros's defeat, there have been many requests for the trio to play in those cities. The apostles who defeat gods in a tough game are treated as heroes. They had a roulette wheel with the cities they had been invited to. Pearl was honored to have the privilege of choosing where they went, so she throws a dart and hits the city of Malra, Holy Source. Faye was excited to meet the kind of apostles they had in that city. Finally, they arrive at their destination. The excited girls run happily because they had finally arrived. Licia asks what the famous game there was, and says they should go to the game store first, but Faye says they should visit the Malra branch first. Pearl asks who that person was holding up a sign welcoming Faye. She found it very suspicious, and Licia didn't understand either. Pearl was super uneasy, until the girl points her finger and speaks to them. Faye asks them to run away, and the girl starts running, suddenly appearing in front of them with her arms wide open. Faye wonders if that was a superhuman display of physical strength. Then he asks if the girl was an apostle. She introduces herself as Nell Reckless, an apostle in the city of Malra. Faye doesn't understand when she says she used to be an apostle, and Nell directly tells Faye that she wanted him to make her his woman, something that silly Faye didn't understand. Nell says she meant she wanted to be his subordinate. Faye says it was extremely confusing, and then she says she had seen the Ouroboros's streaming and had decided he was the only one she could serve. She wanted him to accept her as his subordinate. Faye didn't really understand how she wanted to be subordinate, and thought she was exaggerating, but she explains that she wasn't. She would do anything, like cooking, cleaning, and ironing, and if he wanted, he could even wash his back. Faye says she only said things that sounded very wrong, and wonders what was happening after all. Then he talks to Licia, and Licia says that even though she was on his side, and Pearl whispers that he wanted an unknown girl to wash his back, so it was difficult to defend him, but Faye says they needed to defend themselves. Nell bows to the ground, begging Faye to accept her as his subordinate, and when she realizes it, the trio had left. They were trying to flee, and Nell uses her ability again because she was almost run over, and so she kicks the car with her ability. Her ability was known as momentum inversion. She kicked back any type of energy or mass. Nell says it was unintentional and asks the driver if he was okay, and then the trio arrives at the Malra branch. Pearl doesn't understand who that girl was, neither does Faye, but they were sure it was better for them to run away. And then they see a statue. It was Undine, the water spirit, until Faye is recognized. After all, he had defeated Ouroboros. A man approaches and grabs Pearl's shoulder. Pearl thinks he's a creep and teleports, calling the guard saying the man is a creep, but he says he's not a creep. However, she's sure. And the man says he's actually the manager, and welcomes the Malra Arcane Court branch. He was manager Baelger Ions, and then they climb a huge staircase. Pearl can't take it anymore and starts panting, asking why they're taking the stairs. Baelger says the office was on the 8th floor, but Pearl actually says she saw an elevator right in front of her, and Baelger says it was better for their health to take the stairs, and so they continue the journey. Baelger says about the World Championship of Games, the main event is the Gods Play, and it would be in 3 days. They had already rented the city sports arena as a support location and had reserved for 10,000 people. Pearl is impressed by the 10,000 people and asks if they had sold all the tickets, and Baelger says the people of Malra will cheer them on. Hearing this, Pearl gets a little nervous, but Baelger continues saying there will be another event for interaction. Tomorrow they would have an intermunicipal match and would like them to participate in that too. For Faye it was okay, it was a unique opportunity. Baelger says they had an avalanche of candidates. They wanted to compete with the former ex-goddess, Lilicia, as well as with the famous best rookie of recent years, Faye. Everyone wanted that battle, and Pearl asks all excited if they wanted it with her too, especially because they defeated the undefeated Ouroboros together. The whole world was watching them. But Baelger doesn't say a word and continues climbing the stairs, and Pearl asks about her popularity. Finally, they reach a corridor and Baelger shows the commemorative photos of last year's World Championship of Games and showed who the invited people were at that time. Licia asks what that was. It was an unusual color, and Faye explains that the black clothes belonged to the best branch team and the golden embroidery belonged to the best branch, the main branch of the Arcane Court, until they hear someone saying that the clothes they were wearing were unusual there, then says that the blue lines were from the visitors from Ruins. The guy's name was Dax. Baelger says it's typical of him. He always greets the guests before the match. Dax introduces himself, saying his name is Dax Gear Scimitar. Dax says he's heard a lot about this little group. Baelger finds it offensive for him to call them a little group. As he was talking to a former goddess, Dax didn't intend to treat them specially. He was just interested in knowing if they were good at the game or not. Licia liked it because he only had eyes for games, and she liked humans like Dax. Pearl approaches Baelger and asks about the black uniform, and Baelger says Dax is a rookie who joined there a year ago, set up his team much faster than anyone in the world, and won against a god in his first match. Until that moment he had won 3 and lost 2, and now he represented the Malra branch. Pearl recognizes that Dax was just like Faye. Dax knows Faye's name, and then they stand there in that awkward silence. Dax already imagined they were destined to meet one day, and Faye doesn't understand. Dax says that the dispute with Titan and Ouroboros, he should praise both, and Faye thanks. But Dax tells Faye to join his team, called Tempest Cruiser. He was gathering talented rookies from all over the world. He planned to form the strongest team in history, and completely zero out the gods' game. Faye was the last piece he was looking for, and he asks Faye to go with him. Faye regrets, but they were there for the World Championship of Games, and he wasn't interested. Dax says he understands, and leaves. After all, he had already said what he wanted. It's night, and Faye tells the girls he had something he wanted to show. Tomorrow they would be with the Malra branch, and he was thinking about what kind of game they would play. Then, by pure chance, he found a game where Nell was playing. He remembers that she had asked to be his subordinate as soon as they had arrived in the city. He found out that she had retired about a month ago. Her final score was 3 wins and 3 losses. It wasn't a special number, but she seemed to be good, and Faye says it without sucking up. She followed her captain's orders well and cared about supporting her teammates. The captain surrendered. But Nell tells the captain to calm down, because the game wasn't over. Meep says that according to the majority of the votes, the Statue of God game was over. Nell says they still had 3 members of the team, and she didn't want to end like that. Faye got curious about the shape of that god from the Statue of God game, and Pearl asks Faye if Nell was her opposite, because she lost due to her own failure and decided to retire because she was bothered by it, but with Nell it was the opposite, and she wondered if she had retired even though she still wanted to play. Faye sees a possibility. She should have explained better first. Now that he had run away, it looked like he was a terrible person. The doorbell starts ringing and Pearl goes to see, thinking it was Baelger. It was actually Nell pretending to be room service. Pearl recognizes her even wearing a mask, but Nell says she is not a suspicious person. Until Faye goes to the door asking what Nell was doing. Nell says that wasn't her name like that, but Faye says you can tell by the voice, and Lashia says also by the hair color. Nell then says goodbye and runs away, and Faye says he wanted to talk. Nell stops running and wonders why she ran away. Dax approaches, saying it wasn't like her to do something so pathetic. 2 years ago, they had joined as colleagues. They said one of them would stay at the top. Dax survived and she retired, but actually Nell wasn't lucky with the team. He wanted her to use her skill as an analyst and join his team, but Nell says it's no use. She wanted to join Faye's team, and then they make a bet on tomorrow's friendly match, and she bets on Faye's victory. Dax finds it interesting. The next day, Pearl gets nervous with so many screams, until Nell approaches the trio and says that Faye should have been warned a while ago. But the opponent in the friendly match was Dax, and says it will be a tough bet, and asks him to win. It was time for the game, and Nell was counting on Faye. And so, they enter the arena to start the game. There was a very excited audience at that event. Dax says that was the pride showdown of the city. He had no intention of being the shame there. As a game athlete, he came there to fight, betting their souls. Faye tells him to take what he was going to say as a compliment, and says Dax is intense because he thought Dax was colder. Dax says it depends on the opponent, and then they quickly select the game to start, and the operator goes there to select a game at random.